Thank you very much. Bon appétit à tous. I'm the only one not eating. So my prime minister was here last year. So I heard and I saw the pictures. So he did a great job. I'm gonna try to do my part. I'm gonna start by giving you a brief overview of Ivory Coast, so that we're on the same page. From the 60s, when we got our independence from France, from the 60s to the 80s, the average growth rate in Ivory Coast was around 8% per year. So for 20 years, average growth rate of 8%. And then from the 80s to the 1990s, the average growth rate went down around 5%. And then when we head into 2000, from 2000 to 2011, it was close to zero because of the political turmoil that we went into. And then from 2011 to now, after the slowdown in 2011 of minus 4.4%, we've been growing up by around 9 to 8% per annum. So when you look for the past 3 years, our economy has grown up by 25% or more, which is a good achievement for a country like Ivory Coast, who actually came from far, if I can use that word. Right now, we're the largest economy of the West African Economic and Monetary Union, with 40% of the economy. We're working on a lot of different projects to actually develop the country. You look at our GDP at the moment is around $35 billion. The GDP per capita is around $1,500. It actually went up 26% since 2010. So in less than 4 years, we actually increased the GDP per capita, which is a good way of valuing the wealth of the population. In terms of structural change also, there have been a lot of different things that we went through. We did a lot of things in terms of job creation. Because when you look at a country like Ivory Coast, you do have a big informal sector. So one of the main challenges for the country is to make sure that people move from the informal sector to the formal one. So a lot of initiatives have been done on that regard. One of them was basically to facilitate job creation and make sure that you have a one-stop shop where you can go and create a company. When we initiated initially, it was basically 48 hours to create a company. From 2012, when we started, to now, you can create a company now in 24 hours. So it actually showed that we're actually getting better in terms of initiatives in order to make things easier. We also decreased the creation cost of companies. In the past, to create a company, it was close to $1,200 to create a small enterprise in Ivory Coast. We reduced it to close to $360. So there was more than 70% decrease in the creation cost of companies, which is kind of good also. To give you some numbers, when you look at 2012, there was around 400 companies created in Ivory Coast. Now, when we look at the numbers in 2013, it moved from close to 400 in 2012 to more than 3,000 in 2013. So you can see that things are starting to pay off. Of course, we're not gonna stay there. We want to go further down the road. So a lot of things have been done in that regard. Also, in terms of changing that we did, we try to make sure that all the development that we're having at the moment is inclusive, and it go along with an improvement in the quality of life of the population. We increased the minimum wage in Ivory Coast. So it moved from $70 to $120. Of course, it's, 120 is low, but it's a good change. So right now, the minimum wage in Ivory Coast is $120. Something also good to notice, since 1988, there was no salary increase in public servants' salaries. So there was no increase from 1988. So it's been, and as you know, inflation is there, even if it's contained, but net people were basically getting poorer and poorer. And that's something that we changed also. So since 2012, and we're going to continue that in 2015, we basically increase public service wages also. Of course, all of that is part of a strategy. We're basically looking to get to a level where the ratio of our of the amount of money that we spend into salary as a ratio to our fiscal receipt stays close to 35%. Right now, we're not there yet. We're around 40%, but that's something that we want to do, and we keep a strong and close eye on that ratio. We're doing a lot of things in terms of investment also, because we think that if you want to grow, and if you want to continue to grow at a decent rate, we need to invest. And if you look right now, I just presented the budget, the project of budget for 2015 last week at the Conseil des Ministres, and it's been adopted. So now I'm going to go to the National Assembly. But to give you some kind of like a brief overview, our budget is around $10 billion for 2015, the project, and it's up around 13% from 2014. But when you look at the structure of the budget, we plan to spend around a third of the budget into investment. So a third of the budget is going to go into investment. And why are we doing that? We're doing that because we want to create growth. And that's one of the main goals that we seek. And that amount is around close to 8% of the GDP in terms of public investment, which is a decent number. When you compare that to 2010, in 2010, the ratio, the part of the budget that was allocated to investment was less than 15%. So there is a big change in the way we actually look at our budget and in the way we actually look at our spending. And that's something quite important to notice. We're doing a lot of investment, but we're keeping a strong eye at the same time on our budget deficit. We're doing a lot of things, but the budget deficit still is around 3%, which is a good number when you compare it to other countries. I'm not gonna give names, but when you look at the region, you had other countries that have a budget deficit or close to double-digit numbers. Of course, are we gonna stay at 3%? Probably no. We might probably deteriorate. It's tough. I try to speak English, by the way, so be generous. But we're working on our fiscal deficit. We want to keep it under control. Maybe we're going to go to 3.5, 4% in 2015, 2016. But the most important thing is to know where we're heading to. And what we want is growth, create growth, invest, and make sure that our population get the reward for what we're doing. Something that we did, which is good also, and it's quite important to notice, we went for the first time for a Eurobond into the international market. We went and we issued $750 million 10-year product at a rate of 5.6%, which is basically 50 bips wider than Portugal. And it's the lowest rate in sub-Saharan Africa, except South Africa. So all of that means that we're getting a lot more confidence from the international community into Ivory Coast. We also get for the first time a rating from Moody's, and it was a B1 with positive outlook. Of course, I was hoping for a double B plus, but I think we'll get there sometime. So we're working on getting and improving our indicators. When you look at our debt to GDP ratio, before the HIPC, we were basically around 70%, a bit more than 70%. Right now, we're close to 36% of debt to GDP ratio, which is a good level, and it's a sustainable level that we're heading to. So, I mean, I can speak for hours, but I would like to hear from you. If you have Q&A questions, so it's going to be easier to direct my answers. So.
Thank you very much, Minister. You can hear you're on top of your game, having just presented the budget. Are there any questions on opportunities and opportunity areas as outlined by the Minister, with a focus on structural change, a 26% resurgence in per capita gross domestic product, and an increased focus on investment in the budget? Let's take 3 or 4 questions, and then we'll try and deal with them as a group. Any questions? Sir?
Thank you very much for coming today. In terms of Mali and Burkina Faso and Cote d'Ivoire's historical role as a regional growth engine, where do you see Cote d'Ivoire going forward in the days ahead, especially given your progress? Do you think that this can translate into some of the interior countries?
You, next one.
Yes, nice to see you, Mr. Minister. Welcome to Washington. And you're doing a good job. I was here last year when the Prime Minister was here. So you're doing a very good job. I have an office in Abidjan, and I can confirm that it was not as expensive to set up a company this year from last year. So we did open an office there. Concerning the investments that you're doing that you're going to be doing in Cote d'Ivoire, is it in all sectors, agriculture, housing, infrastructure, or just in certain sectors? Thank you.
And question here, and just while you're getting the mic, as I recall, you reduced the costs for property registration and doubled the numbers of property registration. So that's another achievement on the housing. This gentleman, then that gentleman, and then over to you for answers, Minister.
So Nicholas Sanya from Farah Management. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for being around. I have a question regarding Ivory Coast debt. In many investors' mind, Ivory Coast defaulted in 2010. Are there measures in place to avoid what has happened? And I know Ivory Coast managed to issue a bond at 5 6/8 or 5/8. The level was absolutely fantastic. But what are the measures in place to avoid a potential technical default?
And last.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. My question has to do with, I think, perhaps the perception from the region, perhaps of a certain bias of favored nations that can actually invest. We have interest in foreign direct investment, which doesn't mean that it has to come from European nations. FDIs can also come from African countries. So there's an interest to come to a country, but it seems to be a perception of some preferential treatment of other favored nations. Perhaps if you can dispel this notion, it will help us, because some of us have business interests to invest in your country, but are a little bit leery in terms of market entry. Thank you.
Over to you, Minister.
Yeah. Thank you very much. In terms of, I'm going to start by the question regarding the integration, Mali, Burkina, and other countries. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, we're part of the West African Economic and Monetary Union, which has around 100 million inhabitants. So it's a real market. If we grow, they grow. I mean, if Ivory Coast grow, the other countries around also benefits from that growth. And something which is quite important to notice is we basically one of the main entry points for all the goods that goes to this country. Because if you take Burkina, Mali, they don't have access to the sea. So most of the things they go via the port of Abidjan. And we're actually working on a big project on the port. We basically want to increase the, what do you call it? Le tirant d'eau. The capacity of the ship. We want to be able to the draft. Yeah, in French we say courant d'eau. So we're basically working on that, and it's a big project that we're working on. And if we do that, basically we know Mali, Burkina, and other part of the region will definitely benefit from that. I was reading yesterday something on Jeune Afrique, where they were basically mentioning the low level of intra-African trades, which is around 10% when you compare to other countries, other continent, where in Europe or Asia, it's above 50%. So there's definitely a challenge there and a market for us where we can actually grow together and make sure that things get better. At the same time, I'm going to move to the question of regarding FDI. For me, as long as we do our KYC, know your clients, we don't really care about the color of the money. So as long as we do our KYC, compliance and all, so we're completely open. And we to be honest, if there is a preference to be made, we prefer to have that preference for money coming from Africa. So, I mean, we can share contacts at the end of the meeting. You do have one of the main guy in Ivory Coast also working on investment who is in the room. So we can definitely look, but we more than open to all kind of FDI. Just to give you a number, FDI flow in Ivory Coast is around 2.3% of GDP. It's low. It's increased a lot because it moved from 2012 to 2013. It's actually tripled. But even with that flow, it's still low. It's $800 million in 2013, and it's 2%, 2.3% of GDP. So it's really low, and we want to have a lot more FDI. So if you want to invest, I'm more than welcome to take your money. Trust me. In terms of type of investment that we're doing, so I said right now we're basically hoping for in 2015 for around a third of the budget into investment. We want to invest into a broad range of sectors. Health sector is key. Infrastructure is key. We're basically looking at the whole spread. So there's no particular sector that we favor that is basically left alone. Of course, we basically choose sectors where we're going to put a strong emphasis. Education is key, and we want to build schools, because if you look for the past 15 years, there were no school built in Ivory Coast. And right now, we're basically building school again because we think it's basically the basis for growth. So school building is key. Health facilities are quite important. Energy is quite important. We export energy, electricity to the neighboring countries. Our capacity right now is around 1,600 megawatts. We want to increase it to 4,000 megawatt by 2020. So we already signed a couple of MOUs in order to build some drum. That's what we say. Yeah, some hydro. So basically hydro power facilities. We're actually also looking at coal power also. But the goal is basically to move from around 600 megawatts to 4,000 megawatts by 2020. In terms of the default of Ivory Coast, which is quite important also to come to. In 2011, when we default, it wasn't a question of money. It was a technical default, because at the time there was a restriction on monetary flow from the central bank. So the money was there, but the central bank couldn't make the payments. So that's something quite important, because people think we defaulted because we didn't have money, but the money was there. And when we did our roadshow a few months ago, we actually came back to that point to make sure that everyone understand that at the time the money was there, but there were issues on the signature, who has the right to actually engage that money. Few things have changed since, and we want to avoid the same kind of issues. So at the central bank level, there is a fund that has been set up in order to be able to mitigate that kind of risk. So right now, if you have a situation like this, the central bank will pay and then sort the issue out later on. So that fund exists, and it's some kind of like a hedge against risk that we might have in the future if you have the same kind of things. Like you mentioned, we did a lot of reforms in terms of property rights. The first thing we did from 2012 to 2013, we moved the fees from 10% of the value of the house to 7%. And then last year, we moved it again from 7% to 6%. People wanted me to move it again from 6% to 5%, but it costs a lot of money, because when you reduce it, it means an impact to your budget. So right now, I'm basically waiting to see exactly the exact amount of benefit that we get from that. Right now, it's worked a bit, because even if we reduce it, the nominal amount of money that we make is way better than what we used to do, because people have less incentive to minorate the value of the house that they're buying, and we're starting to get the right amount of money. But we basically keen to increase investment in Ivory Coast. We put together a new investment code back in 2012, which is quite competitive compared to the other codes that you have in the region. Unfortunately, FDI is still slow compared to the potential of Ivory Coast. Right now, things are getting better. There's transparency, there's good governance, and we're more than happy to answer any question you guys might have in order to make you more comfortable about the country.
So thank you very much, Minister. I think you have given a good picture there, and I know certainly it's a strong follow-up from your Prime Minister last year. Now, I know we've only got you for another 3-4 minutes, so what I'm going to ask you to do is maybe introduce your colleagues from Côte d'Ivoire who are here as well, who are staying on later, so that maybe there's an opportunity for people to catch up with them and do the networking with them, since we know you have to leave us in a minute or two.
Okay, perfect. So I will introduce Monsieur Gimbeng. He's in charge of APEXI, so basically the promotion of Ivory Coast, exportation and all. He's doing a lot of networking for us in the US and promoting Ivory Coast abroad. And you have Mr. Enza Kamara. He's basically the head of the promotion of Ivory Coast to US clients. He's based between, I think, New York and Canada, exactly. And there's my colleague also, Mrs. Keita. He's the boss. She's the boss, basically.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Minister, and thank you for a very engaging thing. And more important, I think maybe congratulations on the progress which has been made in consolidating and building on where we got to. And thank you for giving us your time today.
No problem.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.